Tov, good evening. I wanted to start by asking about any comments, questions that you might have from last time's experience, shall we say? Anything? Yeah.
So when we pour the water, the actual act of tahara, is the body covered?
No.
So it's completely naked?
Yes. It's the only time. Good question. Okay. Here's the plan. Hello. Here's the plan for tonight. I'm going to try in the first half or so, a little bit more probably, to go over all of the liturgy. As we do the liturgy, all of the actions will come along with it. In other words, we're going to take a look at both at the same time. That's why those lovely purple handouts that you have, we're going to follow them along. And also, if you hopefully Chesed Shel Emet, we're going to work on that. I want to tell you how that book started. Sorry?
I missed a copy of that book.
You don't have a copy of it? You didn't get that? Okay.
I have that.
Okay.
The time before.
Okay.
Okay.
It's okay. It's all yours. So I wanted to tell you how this whole thing started. Actually, how I got involved in this whole enterprise of Chevra Kadisha work. My whole career had been in education, Jewish education. When I was at the seminary, all those many years, I had vowed that I would never take a pulpit. So much for vows. I vowed that I would never take a pulpit because I really wanted to work in education. Plus, my model of a synagogue pulpit was that of the 1950s, which is when I grew up in that kind of a synagogue. And I said, that's just not for me. I didn't know what was for me, but it wasn't that. Sooner or later, when we moved up to Berkeley, there had never been a conservative minyan or presence in Berkeley. What happened was, a few of us, after a couple of years there in the early 90s, a few of us got together and said, we would like to have a conservative minyan, but a traditional conservative minyan. And one of the first things, and what happened was that bunch of people, we started meeting every other week, then every week, and it mushroomed and grew so that at the end of probably about a year, we had about 200 people showing up every Shabbos morning. And at the beginning, the first year, I was a chaver. I was just a member of the group. And then when people realized that I was also a rabbi, they decided that I should do some of the rabbi stuff, whatever that was. Well, sooner or later, I couldn't handle the rabbi stuff by moonlighting from what I was really doing during the day. And the congregation had to decide, and since it's Berkeley, it took them a long time to decide whether or not they even wanted a rabbi. And then they had to decide whether they wanted me and whether I wanted them, and I wound up as a congregational rabbi for 18 years. One of the first things that every congregation does was to deal with death. And traditionally, every congregations when they were first established bought and maintained a cemetery. When Jews moved to this country, that's the first thing that they did. Well, we did the same thing. We didn't have a cemetery because there was a cemetery, but what we did was establish a Chevra Kadisha. When we started to establish that Chevra Kadisha, I knew nothing, zip, about Chevra Kadisha or Tahara or anything. Not only that, all of this stuff that we're doing now, in a sense, the establishment and the prominence now of Chevra Kadishas all over North America. One of the things that I had to do was to figure out how to learn this stuff. So I apprenticed with the congregation with Congregation Beth Jacob in Oakland, because they had a going Chevra Kadisha there. And one of the things they had was this lovely book, which is called Regulations and Procedure, including traditional prayers and translations for the Jewish Sacred Society of Chicago, Illinois. So, quite kosher. What I did was, when I learned and when I apprenticed with them, I realized that this was simply not going to work for an egalitarian conservative congregation in the 1990s. This does not, yes, nope. I thought it had a date on it. It doesn't. But it's well worn, 65. It's well worn, and it's in Ashkenazis. And it's non-gender sensitive. So I had to start writing a manual for the congregation. It went through 3 versions. The version that you have is number 3. This is version number 2. And version numbers 1 and 2 were very simply a manual, how to do it. It's what we did last week, step by step by step. I changed some of the things in it, and I'll show you what those things are tonight. But sooner or later, in a class that I was teaching online for the Gamliel Institute, which we'll talk about a little more later, but in this class, it was all about the nature of the liturgy for Tahara. I had never studied it. To the contrary, I knew of no one anywhere, historically or now, who had ever studied it and tried to figure out, why are we saying these words? What are they there for? How did they come to be? Do they mean anything? Should we keep saying them? All of those things. In the traditional liturgy, it is it's gendered completely. In the book that we wrote, Dan and I, what we did was we tried to pull out from there what those things were liturgically. In other words, we looked at Tahara not from the practical perspective, not from you do this and this and this, but we looked at it from the different perspective of the liturgy. Why do we say X? Why do we say Y? What's it doing there? Now, let me back up 1 second, a bit of history. Every rabbi has their own specialty, which they love. Some people are into Midrash. Some people are into Tanakh, into Bible. Some are into spirituality. My field that I love to work in is liturgy. I know a little bit about it, partially because I served on the committee that wrote the High Holiday Machzor that many of you use. You know, the one with the 4 columns. Okay. So I know a little bit about liturgy, and what I tried to do was to understand Tahara through the lens of the liturgy. And I began to ask certain kinds of questions. The questions that I asked started by my asking around to a lot of different people, what do you do in the Tahara room with the liturgy? Fair question. They all had manuals. It wasn't this one, but they had other manuals. And I wanted to know, what do they do? So by and large, there were a few different responses. One response was, we ignore it. A second response was, we pick and choose. We like this, we don't like that. I said, why do you pick and choose X and Y? They said, we like it. I said, that's really not a good reason for picking and choosing. A third response was, every time that we have a Tahara, there's always one person only who knows Hebrew. That person, we put him off on the side, or her off to the side, and they're the ones who mumble it. We do the real work. So I said to myself, this is just not going to happen. So it's my I feel a real obligation to make some kind of sense out of this liturgy so that what you're doing makes total sense. Got that? Okay. Next. One of the, the other response was some people do it in English. Fine. All right. So the question is that I always ask a couple of questions about the liturgy. Why did the liturgist choose this particular piece? Why did the liturgist put it where he put it? It was a he, by the way, I'm sure. It was a he. I want to know something about the power of this liturgy. Why did it last for all these years? And how many years did it actually last? Was it around for a long time or not? I wanted to know, what are key words? Whenever someone studies liturgy, one of the first things you do is you try and isolate what the words are, the key words in any paragraph. We'll see a little of that tonight. You try and isolate the key words. You try and isolate echo words. By echo words, I mean a word that comes up in the liturgy that transports you to some other place liturgically. So if I were to say, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, where would you go? To the? To the Amidah, right? You would go, or Michaye Hametim. You would go to, right to the, it would send you back to the Amidah. So there are certain words that transport you to different kinds of places. There are words, and we'll see a couple of them later, and we'll see why whoever put this together, and was an editor. There's very little original in here. Whoever put this together chose very carefully and chose where to place things, okay? The first instance that we have of this liturgy is from a man named Reb Aharon Brechia ben Moshe of Medina in 1626. And he wrote a book called Ma'avar Yavok, which was about Jacob crossing the Yavok River. And it's a very gloomy thing where he goes. But he chose this, and he writes the following. He writes, I composed new ideas and different explanations to offer them as an offering and incense in love and in reverence before the holy congregations, in order that it will make a bridge from the world of change and destruction with its sinful heavenly condition, and will pass the fjord of Yabok to wrestle with Adonai, a man of war, until priests and we will be worthy of seeing God face to face. Not bad. I mean, this is his introduction. So clearly he either took stuff from what was written before and put it down and re-edited it, or put some of this stuff all together in. We have that book, so we know exactly what he put in there, because this is where this thing comes from. Okay, I want to talk about 6 concepts. 6 concepts. The first is Tameh and Tahor. Tameh and Tahor. We started to talk about that before. I want to just suggest once again that everyone in this room, actually everyone everywhere, is Tameh. That's how we live. We live in this system of Tameh. No temple, no red heifer, no Kohen Gadol, no sacrifices, none of that, and we're not even in the land of Israel. When you don't have any of those things, there's no system of Tameh and Tahor. We have hints of Tahara, and another one is with mikvah. But we don't have any real system of Tameh and Tahor that's operative these days. It just doesn't exist. Tahor, for me, means that body which comes into that Tahara room is in a state of Tameh, Tme'ah. That's how we are. It's the task of the Metaharim, of the people doing the Tahara, to elevate that body into a state of tahor, a different state, cleaned up, dressed properly, verses said about that person, but it's our job to elevate that person, that body, into that different state. Okay? Principle number one. Number two. Number two. Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol. What was unique about him? And it was a him.
He was the only one to be able to go into the
Say again? Say it again?
he was the only one able to go into the Kodesh Kodashim. Right?
He was the only one able to go into the Kodesh Kodashim, into the Holy of Holies, when?
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. That was it. Yom Kippur. It was, right? And what happened in there? Nobody knows. We do know that there were a couple of things that went on there. One was please don't take this literally, he saw God. He was in the presence of God. And there was even a little bit of a smoke screen that he took incense into the Kodesh HaKodashim, and the smoke was sort of, you can imagine this kind of Hollywood production. Not only that, around his foot was
A robe.
which,
So they could pull him out.
so they could pull him. There was a rope and a bell, which, if he got into trouble, they would pull him out. Okay, but he, think metaphorically, he was one of the only people. And by the way, he was a human being. He was not a prophet. He was a Kohen. Kohanim got the job by heredity. That's it. He was one of the only people in the Tanakh that we know of that saw God. Moses did also, but Moses is in like another category. Because Moses was Moses. The Kohen Gadol was like you, me. That was it. All right? Think Kohen Gadol, because the Kohen Gadol was dressed in certain clothes in order to get into there. We dress the mate or meta in clothes, tachrichin, shrouds, that are similar to what the Kohen Gadol wore. Because one of the things that's really clear is that that body is going in two directions. One is into the ground, and the other is wherever. Hopefully, maybe meet God. So the only way that we could prepare to meet God was by taking hints from the Bible about places or people who met God. Either symbolically, metaphorically, we don't exactly know what happened inside there, but the Torah tells us that that's what was supposed to happen. Got that? That's the Kohen Gadol. Questions? Because all of this whole system is built on this thing. Okay. 3. Zechariah. Zechariah is a prophet. He's a minor prophet. One of the minor prophets in the back, which we read very frequently, actually twice, once on Hanukkah. And he's a wonderful guy. And he had a task. He had a specific task. His task, remember, he's living in Babylonia. He's not living in Israel. He's exiled in Babylonia. His job, his task, was to get the people who were living in Babylonia back to Israel. That's what he had to do. All those years that they tried to do that, the kings of Babylonia were reluctant to get rid of this slave population. Why should they? until a king called Darius, ascends the throne. Zechariah approaches him and says, "Can we go back?" And he says yes. So, before Zechariah could leave, he had to do two things. One is he had to be ready to establish or reestablish a temple. Because why go back to the land of Israel if you don't have a temple, right? So he had to he had to reestablish a temple. The second thing is he had to establish or create an administrative structure that would permit government, that would permit the people of Israel to go back and to live as the people of Israel in the land of Israel. And the third thing he had to do was he had to find a Kohen Gadol, because somebody has got to run the temple. Since the destruction of the first temple and this one, the whole lineage of Kohen Gadol disappeared. So he had to find somebody new. First thing, with the temple. What do you need in order to build a temple? You all know the answer to this one. You need a fundraising campaign. You think we invented it? Really, it goes way back to here. Not only that, he failed twice before he got enough money to go and do it. Typical, right? Okay, so that's the first thing. He gets the money, he has the money, and they're on their way to it. He appoints a guy named Zerubbabel to run the administrative task. And he finds another man whose name is Yehoshua, Joshua. Now Joshua, for some, and this is Zechariah, it's not me, and Joshua has the ability to be up in heaven. He's there, and Zechariah and the angels say to themselves, Hasiru me'alav habegadim hatzoim. Zechariah, Yehoshua, if you're going to be the high priest, right, you got to dress appropriately. You can't be schmutzy. You can't wear jeans. And they say, take off these awful garments from him. I mean, this is what's going on in Zechariah's imagination or real, I don't know. But it's what happens up there. And Zechariah then, Hasira begadim v'halbeshoto, dress him appropriately. And that's what we do. Now Yehoshua has, and he becomes the Kohen Gadol. But he has a special, he has something special. There's something special about him. Yehoshua, remember, he was an ordinary man. He has the ability to go between upstairs and downstairs. He has the ability to go between heaven and earth, back and forth. Now, Zechariah is so important because of the ability of Yehoshua to go back and forth. So where do we learn that the first thing you do is to really clean the person? From this, because in order to, what you have to do is get cleaned up. And you get cleaned up, and Yehoshua has this ability to be with God. We don't exactly know, it's not as powerful as the Kohen Gadol in the Torah, but it's the story that we are. And 3 times in the ritual of Tahara, there are verses from Zechariah. Once at the beginning, once in the middle, and once at the end. Not by accident. Okay, that's Zechariah. The next one, principle, is the neshama. Neshama means
Soul. Spirit.
neshama means neshama. There's certain words. How do you translate chutzpah? Exactly. No, not quite. No, there's certain words in each language that are so rich that it's difficult to translate from one language to another. Neshama is one of those. Linshom is to breathe. So neshama is a breath. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tahorahi. My neshama is pure. It's in the prayers every morning, the very beginning. There's a neshama in that room, and very much present. Excuse me. When you begin to do a tahara, when you're in the process of doing tahara, there will be the feeling of a neshama in that room. There will be something there that you cannot describe, but you'll feel. Almost everyone that I know that's done a tahara has a feeling that there's a neshama. And everyone also has to address that neshama. It's one of the first things we do and one of the last things we do. And we'll show you a little bit about that in a minute. Okay, 5, Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim. Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, is a book about what?
Love.
About love between?
It's controversial.
Controversial, good. Controversial. The controversy is between?
God and the people of Israel.
God and the people of Israel, and?
Two lovers.
Two lovers. Exactly. Okay. Hmm?
Jesus in somebody.
Not sure. Okay, so you have Shir HaShirim. You have verses from the Song of Songs, which we use and we say when we're dressing the mate. Because the Song of Songs is such a rich volume, metaphorically, about the relationship of the person to God. So we use those verses in order to describe and to put on some of the clothes. Okay? Yes?
I remember reading in one of the books that you gave us that...
Can you say...
I'm sorry, I remember reading in one of the books that you gave us that part of the liturgy might be adjusted for a child.
Okay, thank you. Here's the story with that. Let's start with the traditional liturgy, right? So in the traditional liturgy, there it is, in this book, the verses that are used are all for men. Well, women never died. Never mind. Cynicism, bad. We'll scratch that from the tape. So what I did in here was I put other verses in that for women. Now, when you are preparing a body of a person who is 80 or 90, we're talking about love poetry. When you look at that hand or the face, that's not the face of youth. That's the face of what is not imagined, but that's the face of a whole lifetime of actual beauty and of relationship. So the question comes, what does one do for children? I would suggest, we haven't done it yet, but I would suggest that we probably should take new verses and use them and use it for children. I haven't seen anybody who has done that as of yet. The other question is, you have to define the age of a child, because there are some people who, traditionally, anybody, a child born up until 30 days does not have tahara, does not have a burial, does not, traditionally, no longer, not. We're in a different world right now. Yeah.
Were there Yiddish versions that women?
No, these are psukim. These are for these verses?
The women were doing the Torah for women,
Yeah,
right? And the Hebrew literacy wasn't high.
right.
So was there a Yiddish equivalent of these?
As far as I know, no. I haven't seen it. They were using this is biblical Hebrew, so it was used both for men and for women, as far as I can tell.
You know, you think that sort of the Etzena Rena kind of.
Yeah, I should look at Sena Rena. Thanks, I'll take a look at it. But I don't think there's, I don't recall seeing anything about other kinds of verses. Thanks for the question, though. Okay, Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, 1/5 one. And that's called community. This is something new that just emerged in one of the last classes that we taught. Because one of the sixth element in that room is the history of an entire people that has come together in this Tahara and is part of it. So those are the elements. Those are the elements.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand why Song of Songs.
Say it again.
I didn't understand why Song of Songs.
Why Song of Songs? Everything in the Tahara ritual tries to figure out a way of dealing with the death of the individual, the life of the individual, and the relationship of that individual to what may be coming. If I'm, clearly this is not between two lovers, this is actually between the usual rabbinic explanation of Shir HaShirim being verses between me and God. So, okay, good, thank you. Really feel free to ask questions. All right, those of you that have, one more thing. Okay, entities in the Tahara room. You have this outline, I hope, and that's what we're following. What color? Purple. Yeah. If anybody wants it with the Hebrew, in Hebrew. Anybody for Hebrew? Nobody for Hebrew? Oh. You want it? You have the Hebrew? Yeah. Oh, sorry. It just shows you what I. Okay. So we're the entities in the room. All right. There's us. That is the Metaharim. There's the mate, or Meta. There's God. And there's the community, the Kahal, the history. Most of the time, the prayers are between two of those entities. Got it? It could be between me and God. It could be between me and the mate or Meta. It could be. Right? So there's all of this at play. Now, what I want you to do is, please turn to page, see, I did learn how to be a pulpit rabbi, to page 19. Everybody got the books? Okay. Let me see if I have what I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Aha.
People to share.
Can you share?
No.
Can you share? Oh. Okay. Okay, turn to page 19. On page 19, you'll see a few things. You'll see the chapter overview. You'll see the action 1, which is washing the hands, putting on special clothing, whatever that clothing is, the gowns, the goggles, shoe covers, everything, okay? Action 2. gather around the Meit or Meitah and recite Mechila as a group, asking forgiveness for this Mechila. You look at the number 1 in bold type. What we tried to do, and I will give credit to Dan for this idea, was before every time a tefillah, a prayer is said, we will put a kavanah, a couple of lines at the top telling you what's going on. Now here, it's pretty obvious because it's in English, but later on it's all in Hebrew. So I want you to know that these kavanot were created by us because what we felt was we had to know what was going on, what was going to happen. So the first kavanah is, we begin with the ritual of Tahara by addressing the Meit or Meitah. And here's what's said. So and so. By the way, one of the first things that one must do before you walk into the Tahara room is to get the name of the person. Okay? Yeah.
Do people have books as they're standing around, or does that feel a little?
Okay. Thank you. You know what? Can I finish the liturgy and then can we talk about how to do it?
Yeah.
Okay? Because there's a whole bunch of different ways. We begin by addressing the Meit or Meitah. So and so. We stand here ready to begin our work. Before we do so, we ask your understanding that we will do our best to prepare you for your final journey. That's the kavanah. Okay? That's what's going to happen. And here's what you say. So and so. We ask your forgiveness for any distress we may cause you during this Tahara, page 20. We will do everything possible to ensure that you are treated with respect. Remember that business about kavod? And that all the elements of Tahara are properly completed. Everything we are about to do is for the sake of your honor. Got that? Good. Now, a few things. 1, who should say Mechila? Right. Obviously. Right? It's not the person who knows Hebrew standing over in the corner who says it on behalf of everybody, because you can't do that. Everybody has to say Mechila. Otherwise, that's what you're saying. Okay? 2, what language is it in? How come? Okay. It's in English because I could not find a Hebrew that was compatible with biblical Hebrew, with rabbinic Hebrew that is used later on. In all of them, they seem to be in the language of the land. Hence, this became one in the language of the land, maybe Yiddish. It may have, I have to look, that's a really interesting question. I have to look at that. So this Mechila is done while standing around the Meit, looking at the Meit and asking for forgiveness. If you do that, the assumption is that there's a neshama there. Because otherwise, why would you do this? If it's just a sterile body, you would not say those words. My search through lots of manuals, which, by the way, during the break you can look at, I have a bunch of them here. My search through a lot of manuals, I found that people said Mechila at the beginning. Some manuals had it at the end. And some manuals had it at both the beginning and the end. My understanding of how liturgy works says that it has to be at the beginning and at the end because the rabbis loved sandwiches. They loved beginnings, they loved structure. And the structure at the beginning and the structure at the end, so I really think, and that's why in here you'll find a Mechila at the very end, but it's in the past tense. If I've done anything. Okay? Got that? All right. look at the pink sheet for a second. On the pink sheet, it says the liturgy. 5 different categories. It's the same 5 categories that we talked about last week. By the way, I've never seen a Tahara manual that had, except for some new ones, they just had the liturgy from A to B. You just kept going. It was not structured in this kind of a way. I really believe that this structure was predetermined, because look what's right in the middle. Tahara. That's the pouring of the water. That's so I really think that there was this build-up and then a relaxing, a coming down afterwards. 5 parts to it. Okay, Mechila, Chamol. Look at page. Okay, on page 21 is Chamol. Chamol is a really interesting, by the way, this was also the first edition at least, was the first time that any Tahara manual had both translation and transliteration. There was nothing else before that. That's why I'm hoping that other people are going to study this liturgy. When I asked some of my friends who are really top-notch liturgists, Larry Hoffman, Larry said he has no idea what goes on there. So I really tried to get other people to take a look at this and see if I was on the right track. I hope I am. Chamol. Look at number 2, the Kavanah. God, we are acting on behalf of the neshama of so-and-so, asking you for compassion and mercy on his or her behalf. So who's this between?
Us and God.
Us and God about the Meter Meitah. Got it? Okay. If you look at the Hebrew, Ribon Shel Olam, Chamol, Al so-and-so, Hameit Halaz, Shehu ben Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. Those are echo words that should take you back to traditional liturgy of the Amidah every morning, every afternoon, every evening. Those are words like that. V'tanuach nafsho v'nishmato. Okay, let me just do the following, because I think it'll be a little bit easier. If you look at the next page, remember the word chamol. If you look at if you look at the word, I'm just going to get my cheat sheet out. If you look at this chamol, and I don't want to go through it with you because it would take a little bit of time, a little more time. If you look at chamol, what you'll find is take the words, the roots of the words that repeat the most frequently. If you do that, you'll find out a few different things. First of all, when you do this with I'll give you a suggestion, with any prayer, if you take the major words that repeat and ask yourself, how many times do they repeat? You'll usually get a sense of what that prayer is all about. If you look at Chamol, it's between me and God about this mate, asking for rachem, compassion. If you look and find the word rachem, resh chet mem, it will appear 8 times. If you look for the word atah, it'll appear 9 times. Mate, 7. Baruch, 7. And Adonai 4 times. Now, there's some really interesting things about this. if you look at that second page and look at the very bottom of the second paragraph on 22, see where it says Baruch atah? Baruch atah koreit habrit. Right, blessed is the one who redeems the people of Israel from all suffering through rachamim, through mercy. And look at the bottom paragraph. Baruch atah gadol ha'etzah v'rav ha'aliyah berachamim. See that? And go down 3 lines. Baruch atah hanotein rachamim gedolim v'rov, etc. So you have a phrase that all of you are familiar with, which is what? What repeated? Yeah, Baruch atah. See that? But what's missing?
Adonai.
Adonai, Eloheinu, Melech. So this is not a bracha. This is not a blessing. This is a hint at a blessing. I think it's that way because you're in a tahara room. You're touching a dead body. You can't do a blessing, a full blessing, while you're touching a dead body, which is the highest degree of tum'ah. I just don't think you can do that in a tahara room. There are no blessings in this. None at all. Okay, so if Mechila is between me and the mate, or metah, and Chamol is between me and God about the metah, the third one, on page 29, look at the kavanah. God, give us the strength to do our work properly, keep us from harm, and give us heightened awareness of what we are doing. Who's that between?
Us and God.
Between us and God about us. Because we're doing this act and we want the strength to be able to do it. We want to be able to do it properly, and what we're doing is not about us. Got that? All right. Look at the next part, chapter 6, page 35, or actually 36. Okay, from here on in, those 3 sections, that is, those 3 prayers, were prayers. They weren't biblical verses. From here on in, they're all quotes. But you know that when someone takes quotes out of context, they do it for a purpose. In other words, they just don't take it out of context because they happen to like the verse. They take it out of context and plunk it in liturgically for a specific reason. Look, when you say Shema Yisrael, context. The context is the book of Devarim, of the Deuteronomy. But the rabbis put it in for a liturgical purpose. What here, all the verses here that they've pulled out of the Bible are for liturgical purposes. So look what happens here. The first one, action 3, or Roman numeral 4 on page 36. We invoke the mythical context of Zechariah. What's the kavanah? God, help us to take the first step in preparing so-and-so for this journey. As we do so, may we be conscious to show this Mater Metah the same dignity that God's angel showed to Joshua in preparing him to be Kohen Gadol. And look at the Hebrew. Next page. Vaya'an vayomer el ha'omdim lefanav lemor hasiru habigadim. Take off these filthy garments from him. And that's what you say when you begin to do each other's fingernails, to do the fingernails. What we did the last time. When you begin to clean the body. That's what you're doing. And what this is doing is raising you say this to raise the consciousness of the action that you're about to be doing. Okay? Good.
Question.
Yes.
So, do we speak the covenant out loud and also do the,
Okay. So remember I told you before that there were different ways that different chevras handle the liturgy? So now there are some chevras who say, you know what, I'm not going to do the liturgy, but I'm going to do all the kavanot. Because the kavanot replaced, the kavanot now replaced the liturgy. Should you do the kavanah out loud before? I don't think so. I think you should read them by yourself first and then say the words.
at the time.
Yeah. At that time. That's how I think it should go. There are a lot of chevras, and I don't know if no, I didn't. Yeah, we did. Last time we gave you a list of all of the actions. There's a way of, if you go on our website, you can take that, download it, and blow it up and put it up on the wall in a Tahara room. Or on our website are also all of these tefillot and the kavanot. You can also put those up on the wall. So by just making them into making them into poster size. Okay? That was partial response.
I'd just like to share that moment that you're talking about, that piece of liturgy, remove the soiled garments, etc. In our chevra, that's actually the moment that we first remove the sheet that's been covering the maid and replace it with the drape that will cover the maid during the
While you're doing it.
practical washing, and if there's any, like the hospital tag is still there or whatever, that's when we're actually doing that piece.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very careful to follow what's happening liturgically is informing what we're doing on a physical level, and it's very powerful for us.
So that's when it's done. But that's the point, that's the purpose of all of this liturgy, which is to try and help you have that kavanah. So that, and I believe that this is the other purpose of this liturgy. When you do your first tahara, or your second, or your third, there's kavanah. You got it. What happens when you get to your 100th? I think that the purpose of the liturgy is to remind you, listen to what you're doing and pay attention to what you're doing. And I think that that's the purpose of all of this stuff in here. So that the 100th time that you do it has the same kavanah for that mate that the first time you do it has. Okay. I'm going to zip along and just do a couple more things with you. If you look at page 46. Yeah.
Page 36 corresponds to which one in the list?
I have to look at 36. Vayan Vayomer? B4. Rechitza. The next one is Rosho Ketem Paz, which is a way of understanding what it is that we're doing, and that this body is not just a body, and that this body is a divine creation. Okay? I should have put the pages on. Thank you. Page 39. But by the way, I will just show you that on page 39, Rosho Ketem Paz. You see that? That says for a male. In most of the liturgies that I took a look at, that's the only verses they have. I added in page 40 for a female, just to get those verses in, that seemed to me to be more appropriate to a female. Okay, look at, please, page 46. Amar Rabbi Akiva. Amar Rabbi Akiva. So the kavanah, help us prepare this neshama to enter the heavenly kingdom and to witness your presence. Amar Rabbi Akiva, Ashrechem Yisrael, lemi lifnei mi yatem mitaharim, umi mitaher etchem. Right? Rabbi Akiva says, you're fortunate, Israel. Before whom do you purify yourselves? And who purifies you? Your God in heaven, as it is said, I will sprinkle clean water upon you, and you shall be clean. Ezekiel. Mikveh, O hope of Israel, Mikveh Yisrael. That's a play on words. Just as the ritual body purifies the impure, so does the Holy One, blessed be He, purify Israel. So it's not really us that's doing this tahara. It's really God. We're stand-ins. Okay. More for, there's another verse, I will sprinkle clean water on you, you shall be clean, I shall cleanse you from all your uncleanliness and from all your fetishes. Now look at page 50. On page 50 we have tahorhu taharahi. That, by the way, is language, that language is in traditional manuals, tahorahi. It wasn't all tahorhu. Tahorahi, you're pouring the water and you're saying, I have done this action. I have elevated the neshama of this person to another level. It doesn't mean I am, he or she is pure. I don't know another word to use for it, but what's going on there is you're done. This is it. You've done it. This is the high point. You've reached it. This is it. This is really the top. And so taharhu and taharahi is not he is pure, she is pure. It's like a statement of we did it. And they're ready, right. We're ready to dress. Look at the bottom of page 50. Okay, see what it says? By pouring the water, we have completed the process. The words below are recited 3 times. V'hit kadishtem v'hitem kadoshim ki kadosh ani Adonai. See that? Good. Now look at the English on the other side. You shall sanctify yourselves and be holy, for I, Adonai, am holy. See that? Look at the quote. Where it's from? It is based on Leviticus 11:44, because if you look at Leviticus 11:44, it says, "V'hikadishtem v'hiyitim kadoshim ki kadosh ani." They added Adonai. Why? They wanted to get to 7. 7 words. 7 is the number of completion. The sentence, the pasuk itself from Leviticus only had 6. So what do? Add another word. And you get 7. That was one of the, okay. Chapter 8, Halbasha and Halana. Halbasha means dressing. Halana, and our understanding of it, is placing the body into the casket. In traditional terms, halana, the term itself, came from what you did with the body once someone died, which is you took the body and you placed the body on the floor. That was halana. That was the traditional way of doing it. Once the person had died, put the body on the floor. We're using it here slightly differently. We're putting it in the body into the casket. And you can see all of these words all on page 54. These are words from Shir HaShirim, from Isaiah, from Zechariah. There's one from Isaiah. There's one from Isaiah. There's one from Zechariah. There's another one from Isaiah. And all of these verses are intended to show, or part of it is, what's happening now is a description of a relationship here of love between the mate, Meta, and God. Okay? But I want to, where are the other ones? There it is. Okay. Look at page 67. And with this, we'll finish with the liturgy. When all is said and done, you've dressed the mate or Meta, just like we did last time. You've dressed it, and there's words to, and you've placed the body into the casket. Here are the words that you say. Look at the bottom of page 67. Hine mitato shel Shlomo. This is Solomon's couch. It really should have said bier, B-I-E-R. Encircled by 60 warriors of the warriors of Israel. In other words, these weren't just schleppers. These were Taka warriors. I mean, they were right? All of them trained in warfare, skilled in battle, each with a sword on thigh because of terror by night. What's terror by night? What does that mean?
Night fear of the dark. Fear of the dark.
Fear of the dark, meaning, in this case, fear of the future. Right? So what this is one of the most powerful statements, because the imagery is that this mate or meta is surrounded by people who are going to protect them. The notion is protection from night terrors. Those of you that have kids know what night terrors are. So this is the ultimate in night terror. This is Shlomo. This is King Solomon. This is not a schlepper. This is the king who has him, who's afraid of, and he's encircled. Now just imagine the mate or the meta encircled by these 60 warriors. What do you need after you have this statement? What do you really need to end it all off? You need a blessing. Blessing. So look at the next page. In the Hebrew on 69, what's the blessing? Yivarechecha Adonai. That's how you end. See that? Now, I'm not, given my rabbinic education, I'm not one for mystical stuff. But I want to tell you something. How many warriors were there? 60. Good. How many letters are there in Yivarechecha? 60. Thank you. 60. I can't explain it, but it's there. 60.
That's the male form. The male form has 60.
What?
The male form has 60.
Yes. Same with the female. Yivarchech. I just changed the vocalization. Okay. Any questions about this liturgy stuff? This is a lot. Now, in order to use it, in order to do it, I want to suggest that there are a bunch of different ways. One is, as some people do, just the kavanot. I think that everybody should do mechila at the beginning and at the end, because you've been involved in it. Yes?
Wouldn't it make sense to get together from time to time and just run through the liturgy together?
Yeah. I don't think that what we're doing here means that you've been trained.
No, I know.
It's a lot more.
We're talking about like the different things that people might do and the different things that have that they've done, and it seems to me it would make sense. Like I wonder when maybe they do get together. I wonder if groups do get together, and especially if you have a new member or somebody who hasn't done it before, who's maybe such a little.
There's also a way of refreshing, and we really didn't study the liturgy. I mean, we studied about it. We didn't look at the words. We didn't read it. I want to suggest that you go home and read Hebrew and practice your Hebrew. That's one way of doing it. So the liturgy, in a lot of places, everybody does the liturgy. In a lot of places, somebody stands off to the side and reads it, I think except for Mechila. It seems to me that when you're dressing and you're putting a sleeve or you're putting the tunic over somebody, there's a verse to say. I think everybody should say it when you do it. Will that happen? Probably not at the beginning, because it's going to be it's going to be touch and go at the very beginning. You have to learn how to do all of this stuff till it becomes sort of part of it. But I want to suggest also that one other thing, that terror by night, remember that? There's also another, I think the rabbis were very, or whoever put this together, said that terror by night, specifically, not only about the mate or the metah, but also about the metaharim. Also about the people who are doing the tahara. Because someday, it's going to be us. And to recognize that, and to recognize that fear and say it out loud is a source, I think, of comfort. Okay, let's take a break for 5 minutes and then we'll come back.